Hello everyone, I'm Katra. I'll try to keep this intro short, but feel free to skip to the next section. I've been playing Genshin every single day since release, and now that we're about to move into Not Cry, I thought it would be a good idea to sort of review the game. The developers have said that a lot of things will change with the next set of patches, and I want to compile everything I like and dislike about the game before then, so that once Not Cry releases, I can better see if they've actually fixed the things I don't like, and if they've kept the ones I do like. I'm also doing this because I work as a QA tester, and I sometimes struggle with pinpointing what I like and dislike about the game. I'm hoping these videos will help me fix that. A small warning, I'm not a YouTuber, I'm not a writer, just a guy who likes video games a little too much. This video is barely edited, and most of the points here you've probably heard plenty of times. I'm also not very good at expressing myself, so... the format I plan to follow for reviews on this channel is dividing every review into two videos, one where I'm negative and angry, and another where I'm positive and nice. I think it's more original, and also funnier than doing a normal review. No, this video isn't rage bait, trust me. If I wanted to actually make a rage bait video, I could do much better than this. I will at times compare Genshin to other gacha games if I need to, but don't worry about any sort of bias. I hate all gacha games equally. Also, feel free to only listen to the video instead of watching it. The background will be mostly gameplay from the latest story quests. That doesn't really have anything to do with what I'm saying. Anyway, without further ado, let's start. Here's everything I hate about Genshin Impact as of version 5.7. My main complaint about Genshin's story is just how slow things are progressing. Our first objective we got when the game started was to meet all the Archons. It's been 5 years and we still haven't completed it, which is absolutely insane. You could argue that the real objective was to find your sibling, and that was completed in version 1.4. But I'd argue that the real objective was to reunite with your sibling, and that's not happening as long as they're with the Abyss. And even if you want to be stubborn about it and double down on saying that 1.4 was where that objective was completed, here's my question to you. Did anything change after version 1.4? No, of course not. The Traveler was still on the path to meet all the Archons, and because the Traveler is unable to speak about their emotions, we couldn't really tell if anything about them had changed after that. And the worst part about this is that Hoyoverse has recently mentioned that they actually think they are moving too fast with the story. And I can't even begin to comprehend how they would reach that conclusion. I also find it really funny how the Loom of Fate was completed back in Sumeru, and at the end of the quest they explain what it does and how dangerous it is. So you would think the Abyss Order would use it immediately, right? Well, actually no, it took 2 years for the follow-up to that quest. And I'm sitting here wondering what could have caused the Order to wait that long to put their next plan in motion. And yes, you can argue that 2 years outside of the game are not 2 years inside of the game, but to that I say there's no way that the journey from Sumeru to Natlan was that fast in game. Now here's my second complaint about the story. The Traveler. There's nothing I hate more in JRPGs than when the main character is silent. It completely kills the game. I can sort of understand it in games where you can customize the main character, but that is clearly not the case here. If the Traveler was an actual character that had actually progressed and changed over these past 5 years, then my first complaint about the story might not even exist. But no, instead of having an expressive protagonist, we're stuck with a silent robot that can only talk through a childish fairy. And please don't try to argue that they look and sound expressive in cutscenes, or that you can tell what they're thinking by their facial expressions. Cutscenes are barely 5% of the whole game, and the facial expressions in dialogues aren't complex enough for anyone to be able to see that. The Trailblazer in Star Rail might not be the best character, but at least they talk a lot more than the Traveler and feel less like an empty vessel that can only speak through the player's text choices. The worst part is that not only do they talk a lot more, but their choices are also a lot more meaningful. You can pretty much choose the Trailblazer's personality with them. And I've not played Honkai Impact 3rd yet, but I've only heard people say good things about Kiana Kaslana. Why can't we have that here? And don't say that we can have that here because we have choices in the dialogues. Star Rail makes those work just fine, and I'm also pretty sure that there's less than maybe 3 meaningful dialogue choices in Genshin. 99% of them are just a complete sentence divided into 2 options for literally no reason. Look, all I'm trying to say is that we already have 2 great voice actors for the Traveler. There's literally no reason not to use them. If you're going to give them a voice in cutscenes, you might as well give them a voice everywhere and remove the dumb dialogue choices. Moving on to the third complaint. The game is clearly more focused on lore than on characters. Now, this is more of a me thing than the other 2 issues, and I know everyone is going to say that I'm dumb for this. I understand that there's a lot of people who enjoy reading every little detail and taking notes and knowing all of the lore in the game, but me personally, I hate that. I don't want to read a wall of text on artifacts and weapons, I don't want to read books, and I don't want to check out every single piece of content that's outside the game. I just want to play the actual game and to be able to understand the story by actually playing the game, and I don't think I'm alone in that. Here's an example. When Mawika breaks the sky in version 5.1, I was like, oh cool, it's the fake sky Wanderer mentioned all the way back when, that's cool. But that was the extent of my knowledge. Now, when I went to check for the reactions of people who have actually read everything in the game, and outside the game, they knew way more than I did. And not just minor details, but really important stuff like what is behind the false sky and the names of the moons shown there. The same happened with Renova in version 5.3. In fact, as I'm writing the script and checking the Genshin wiki for facts, I'm seeing concepts and names here that I've never heard in my life but seem pretty important. How come all of these things are not mentioned in the main quests or even the side quests? I can understand having books and hidden text in the game, but in most games these just contain minor details, cool facts, or more detailed explanations of things we already know from the main story. But here in Genshin, it feels like half of the game's story is outside the main quests. The story elements at play here seem cool, and I would love to learn more, but making me go out of my way to understand them feels really bad. And let's not forget that there's some things that aren't even inside the game to begin with, which is even worse. For some reason, Hoyoverse thinks it's okay to put massive lore bombs inside YouTube trailers and then just not show those in-game in any way. The Fatui trailer from way back when and the most recent Shades trailers are examples of that. Any person who doesn't follow the Genshin YouTube channel will miss out on important information, and I just don't think it should be this way. The other side of the problem of Hoyoverse focusing more on lore than characters is that, well, the characters end up not being anything special. I can count the characters that have had actually some sort of evolution in one hand, and I'm pretty sure I have fingers to spare. For a game with over 50 story quests, where you spend around 4 or 5 hours with a specific character, you would think that there would be something there, right? Well, not really, considering that a few of these quests end up focusing on random NPCs for literally no reason, and a lot of these quests end up feeling more like promotional material for the character. They're there so you can see what the character's personality and traits are, and so you can get somewhat attached to the character and end up pulling for them. It also doesn't help that, because they always have to release a story quest for every new character, they end up barely releasing follow-up quests for already existing characters, which is what would actually help these characters grow and let us see new sides of them. To be honest, I would actually remove all story quests from the game moving forward, and I'm glad that's what they seem to be doing for Not Cry. I think having quests specific to a single character is really dumb and just not realistic at all. It makes way more sense to me to make main quests longer and have the characters interact and evolve there, instead of just having separate quests and having characters evolve individually instead of together as a group. I just think it's better this way. Okay, what I'm going to say next isn't really an issue with the story necessarily, but I wanna talk about it anyway. And it's because it's taking so long and the main actual plot only advances when Dainsleif shows up, pretty much. I can actually barely remember important details about the story. If you ask me now to write a timeline for the events, like when the Traveler came to Teyvat, the fall of Canria and all of that, I'll just draw a blank. But if you ask me way back when those concepts were actually explained in the story, I would have easily been able to. It also doesn't really help that the writing itself makes me question myself and my intelligence, like how in the latest quests it is casually mentioned that the Traveler came to Teyvat on a spaceship. When I heard that, I started thinking if I maybe had memory lost, like had I somehow forgotten about that? That seems like a really important detail that should have been mentioned way before in the story. It also doesn't help to remember details when they don't like explaining how some things work. Like for example, we were told the Loom of Fate can weave ley lines. First off, weave is a really non-specific word to use there. Second, why not explain how? You can't just say that a device has the power to pretty much rewrite reality and not explain how that's possible. The last thing I want to say about this is that the increasing complexity also makes it really hard to follow the plot. Let's look at the first Dainsleif quest. Pretty easy to follow, right? You investigate the Abyss Order, Dainsleif talks about Canria in a way that's somewhat easy to follow, you find your sibling, and the quest ends. Now compare that to the latest quest, where the space-time of the Canria of the past has quote-unquote fused with the space-time of the current Natlan, and you run into time travel stuff where it turns out a character has something in the future because they got it in the past from you in the future from the fused space-times? Are you lost yet? I sure am. I noticed this next complaint might sound stupid considering how I said the game is too slow, but I feel like we're spending too little time with the main quest for every nation. Let me explain here with an example. In Azuma, In terms of hype moments, it was a pretty good nation actually, but when it comes to actual storytelling, it is completely overshadowed by all other nations. Why? Because it didn't have enough time to flesh out any of the cool concepts it had. The power struggles between the three missions, the resistance, the Bishop Hunt, etc. And the characters didn't have enough time either. When I saw the image for version 2.1, the one with Kokomi standing in front of Raiden, I was like, wow, they're totally going to fight and it's going to be an incredible clash of ideals and strength. The quest releases, I play the quest, Kokomi does nothing, Sara gets one-tapped by Signora, Goro is just standing there while Kazuha at least does something, but anyway, you get my point. And this is not something exclusive to Inazuma either. I believe every nation would have benefited from having one or two extra versions. I would want the Archon questline for a nation to last more than 2 or 3 patches, to really give it the time it deserves to properly flesh out characters inside the quests, instead of through specific character quests. It would also help massively with avoiding dead patches, because honestly, if a version doesn't have an Archon quest, it's really hard for me to remember it. Just ask me what happens on any 0.4, 0.5 or 0.6 patch, and I'll just draw a blank. Giving more time this way would also help fix another issue where characters released after the Archon quest just always have stupid excuses as to why they weren't there during the actual quest. But I'll talk about this issue in more detail in the character section later in the video. My last complaint about Genshin's story in general is that it mostly feels really childish and not in a good way, like a cheesy JRPG. And I have a problem here because I actually can't explain why it feels this way to me. The first 4 reasons, I'm confident in saying that it's true for those, but Fontaine had plenty of darker elements and Natlan killed a lot of people with the war against the Abyss. But even for those 2 reasons, it still felt that way a bit, and I can't quite pinpoint why. Maybe it's because a lot of the characters are really young, maybe it's the art style, maybe it's because of Paimon completely taking the seriousness out of any situation. Might be because the game lacks that tiny amount of edginess that's present in most JRPGs. I can't quite tell you what's the issue here, but I can tell you how to fix it though. Actually, let me tell you how to fix all the problems I've mentioned before. We just take whoever wrote Chet's questline in the desert, and we promote them to being the new main story writer for the whole game. That's it, problem solved. I'll talk more about this once I talk about everything I like about the game in the next video, but for now, let's stop talking about the story and move on to the next segment. My biggest complaint about Genshin's characters is that I have absolutely zero hype to pull for any of them. The only time I felt hype for a character was Xiao, and that doesn't really count because for one, Xiao is awesome, and for two, it was the beginning of the game and the hype was pretty much at an all-time high. Do you want to know why I have no hype for any of the characters? There's a few reasons, but the biggest one is power creep. Gacha games without it are incapable of hyping me up for a new character. Seeing as Genshin is the most successful gacha game pretty much of all time, and it barely has any power creep, I think it's safe to say that you can pull off a gacha game without power creep. But I'm not here to talk about facts, and I'm not here to be objective. I'm just here to talk about what I don't like, and I don't like games without power creep. If the new anniversary character doesn't completely break the game, then how am I supposed to be excited for it? Another factor at play here is what I call the coolness factor. How was I supposed to be hyped from a Wicca when Arlecchino completely wipes the floor with her in terms of VFX and animations, even though she came out many versions before her? If you want to know what I expect from a gacha game to do, you can take a look at Star Rail. They just released Castories for the anniversary, and that was hype, lots of promotion, cool design, really strong character, and now, instead of being like Genshin, which would go back to releasing characters that are less cool for some reason, they're coming out with Fainon, who is so strong it's not even funny, and with animations and visual effects that somehow completely overshadow Castories. Characters that are special, be it because they're really important to the story, or because they are released at important times like the anniversary or for New Year's, they should be strong, they should be cool, they should make you want to pull for them. That is not the case here in Genshin. And one more thing I want to say before moving to the next point, just because I know people might say I only pull for meta characters, I want to show you here 2 images that should hopefully change your mind. But anyway, moving on. Here's a second thing that pisses me off about Genshin's characters. For some reason, they don't want to release upgraded versions of them. And they don't even want to buff all characters. I was talking about hype earlier, and there's nothing more hype than when an old beloved character gets a new updated version. I don't understand how this hasn't happened once in 5 years, or how they haven't at least buffed the old characters if they don't want to release new versions of them. Because yeah, there's not much power creep in the game, but go ahead and try to beat Abyss 12 with something like Eula, Xinyan, Lisa, etc. And I'm sure there will be some insane people who can do it, but me personally, I would enjoy being able to play the characters I like and not having to reset 1,000 times to get a perfect run on the Abyss. Hell, some of these characters are barely even usable for exploration, and it's really sad. Would it really lose them so much money to buff all characters? Do they think we will all stop falling for new units if they make Eula not hit like a wet noodle? There's a fanbase for every single character in the game, and I don't think people who like the older characters should be punished for it. And when it comes to releasing upgraded versions, I don't think I even have to make an argument for it. I can't imagine anyone would be against this. Imagine a 5-star version of Ning Wang, which she deserved from the very start, or a 5-star version of Lisa. She literally would have joined the Hexen Circle, and we know she's hiding her real power. How is she still a 4-star? What are they waiting for here? Just why not do it? Another thing I hate about the characters, that I actually mentioned before in the story section, is how a lot of them will just magically appear in the story at the patch they are released, and Hoyoverse can barely be bothered to come up with solid excuses why they didn't. Do they really want me to believe that Escoffier just stayed in her house while the entirety of Fontaine was happening? Really? That's the best they could come up with? And how come we didn't see Dahlia once during all the times we came back to Mondstadt for an event? Honestly, I don't even think they've even bothered to come up with some sort of excuse for this one. Or if they have, I sure haven't heard it. Would it be so hard to introduce playable characters in the story a few patches before they are released? Or even better, make them all appear on every version 0 when the story for the region starts. That's what Starrail did with Penacony, and I'm furious, so I don't understand why we can do the same thing here. Looking at the trailers we've gotten for Not Cry, it seems this might be fixed, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I talked before about how cool it is when characters get power-ups, right? Well, there is technically one character that does, so let's complain about the Traveler a bit more, and more specifically about how boring the elements have been handled in regards to the Traveler regaining their powers. You just walk up to the statue, touch it, done. It would have been really nice if getting back the elements was actually tied to the main story, or if the elements had some sort of deeper meaning. Before Inazuma came out, I thought it was weird how the Archon of Eternity had the power of electricity, considering it is known to be fast, fleeting, hard to contain, pretty much the opposite of Eternity. I thought it would have been cool if they touched on that during the story and the Traveler and Raiden had some sort of confrontation about it, but no, of course not. This is Genshin we're talking about. You just went in, touched a statue, and done. Now, this one issue has sort of been fixed. The way the fire element was handled was nothing out of this world, but it sure was a lot better than before. Getting the element during the final boss was pretty cool, and I hope they do something cooler for the last element. Try to actually give some meaning to the elements and make the power-up more interesting, similar to how Starrail does it. Another problem I have with the characters is with their gameplay. Pretty much every support's character in the game just plays like this. E, then Q, then swap off. And the DPS characters are not much better, either being focused on normal attacks or charge attacks. We need more variety in rotations, and I'm going to make a specific a point here. I'm talking specifically about normal player rotations. If you want to play Mabuika like this is Super Smash Bros. Melee, then that's your choice, but I'm not going to do that. We already have a few characters that break the norm a little bit at least. Chlorinde has to press E between normal attacks, Kinich has to time the attacks while swinging around, Navia is more focused on skill damage, and my favorite here is Baresa, which actually forces you to use all of her buttons in a specific order to deal damage. It's clear that they can design characters with cool gameplay, so I'm not sure why they keep releasing characters without it. Chaska just has you holding left click, Escoffier is just E plus Q, Citlali is just E plus Q. With Mabuika you can just spin around holding left click. To be honest, I think a big problem here is that the characters are stuck with just 2 buttons. If they at least had a 3rd button, it would be a lot better in my opinion, and maybe easier to design more fun rotations, but I understand that it's a bit late to ask for that at this stage in the game. Alright, this next problem is the one you've probably heard a million times on social media ever since pretty much the release of Sumeru, so I'll be brief about it. The game desperately needs more variety when it comes to characters. And I'm not just talking about skin colors, even though that's a massive issue. I'm also talking about body types. I thought every character was placed in a body type group to be able to reuse basic animations, and that it also meant that they had to make all characters in the same group with a similar shape. But recently they released Varesa, and her shape is quite different from all the other characters in the same body type group, which means they're clearly able to fix the issue, so I just don't get why they haven't been doing it. We had to wait 5 years to get a character with a slightly different body shape, and the changes aren't even that big, it's just her arms and legs being a bit wider. Compare that with a game like Sandless, where you have big bears that take up half of your screen and actually feel way different to play than the rest of the cast, and it's clear to see that they're not doing enough here. I'm hoping that they'll start to think about this more going forward, but the problem is that the damage is already done. We have 5 years worth of characters that are incredibly similar in shape, and that are probably not going to get changed. There's many characters that should be bigger, or more muscular, or taller, or thicker. You get my point. I don't know exactly why they won't go back and change them. I assume it's either because of they don't want to, or because of gacha laws, but they pretty much never go back to change stuff about characters, and it's a shame because it means that we're just going to have to deal with this. Alright, now that I'm done complaining about the story and the characters, let's move on to gameplay. There's fortunately not as many issues with the gameplay, but the few that exist are incredibly obnoxious. The first and most important thing that makes the gameplay really bad at times is the enemy AI. It really feels like the AI is specifically coded to make you lose as much time as possible during combat. Starting with the AI for melee enemies, where 90% of melee enemies in the game, for some inexplicable reason, walk away from you between their attacks. Nowadays, this isn't as big an issue because a lot of the stronger DPS characters have crazy AoE or just ways to dash to their enemies, but it still affects plenty of characters, mostly the melee ones. Do you know how bad it feels to try to hit an enemy with a melee attack just for them to walk a few steps back and dodge it? It's really bad. But the issues don't just stop at the walking animations. A lot of the enemies also have attacks that make them dash away. Think of the Masho Genki and their stupid dashes and clones, the regular samurai and their step back, the Pyro Fatui and their jump back, etc. But it actually doesn't stop there, because even the enemies that have attacks that are supposed to dash towards you will sometimes end up using the attack when they're already near you and therefore flying away. Think of the rolling enemies from Fontaine, the Ruin Graders, or the sharks from Enkanomiya. But sometimes enemies don't even need to move to make you lose time. Let's look at how the Abyss Heralds will play a hilariously long animation before getting their shields, how the Magu Genki becomes invulnerable for like 5 seconds at 3/4 of HP, or the attack that the Automaton boss does where it flies into the air for like 2 whole seconds. And here's another point I'm sure all Xiao mains will understand. Some enemies, for some reason, just have negative knockback resistance. Playing Xiao against small or medium-sized enemies is awful. With every plunge attack, they get knocked back to the other side of the abyss, forcing you to keep repositioning, and sometimes if you're not careful, the enemies will split apart, making you lose out on the AoE damage. All of these things might seem pretty minor individually, but combined they will completely kill the flow of combat and make the simple act of hitting an enemy just extremely annoying sometimes. The second complaint here, which to be honest is related to the previous one, is that the difficulty in combat comes from the fights being obnoxious instead of actual difficulty. Let's look at the latest endgame mode, Stygian Onslaught, and the enemies there. Having a boss become pretty much invincible unless you hit it with a billion cryo attacks doesn't make the fight difficult, it just makes it incredibly annoying and straight up impossible if you don't have good cryo units. The Abyss version is at least playable with 4-star units, but the version here in Stygian Onslaught is just unplayable if you don't have Scarecrow or Escoffier. And the same happens with the lava boss that pretty much requires you to use a pyro team. I don't think this one is as bad as the other boss, but it's still not good design. And it's not only these two, many bosses will restrict your playstyle, either because they are immune or heavily resistant to certain elements, because they require a specific element to deal with a mechanic, or because they require a specific weapon type to deal with a mechanic. And if it was only one of these, then it wouldn't be so bad, but the Abyss requires you to build one team for 3 chambers, and nothing's stopping them from putting a boss that's best defeated with Pyro before a boss that's best defeated with Cryo, like on the latest Abyss. And that makes team building a real nightmare for people that might not have good units for every element. Another issue with combat is that more and more lately it's just becoming hitting a giant punching bag. There's no mechanics to think about, barely any attacks to dodge, and it's just doing the same rotation over and over until the big enemy with over 7 million HP dies. I'm not asking for mechanics as complicated as the ones you would see on some MMO raids, but surely we can do a bit better. In the Arlecchino boss fight, you sometimes need to heal yourself to clear a debuff, and then hit her with a charge attack to stop an enrage. It's not the most difficult mechanic in the world, but at least it's something. It changes up your rotation and makes you think a little bit. The latest bosses in endgame are what I mentioned before. You just hit them with Pyro or Cryo, which isn't a real mechanic at all, because you should always be building a team to defeat them with those elements. You can say that having more difficult mechanics would make the Abyss worse, because they would take time, to which I say, well, what if the Abyss wasn't always a DPS race? It's been 5 years, and every single Abyss has been a DPS race. Then they released the Theater mode, and it's still a DPS race. And now they've released Station Onslaught, and it's still a DPS race. Maybe we can have an in-game mode that's more than just pumping out numbers mindlessly. I think it would be nice. There's also one issue that's not as big as the previous ones, but it might even be more annoying than those. It's the targeting system. If you've ever played Venti, you know what I'm about to say. You look in the direction you want to burst, you press Q, and the burst goes in a completely different direction because it turns out that there was one enemy that was 1 pixel closer than the one you were looking at. If you're not going to give us a proper targeting system where we want to select an enemy to focus on, then at least let us choose between target closest enemy and target enemy closest to camera center. It seems like such a minor issue, but I cannot stress enough just how many times I've missed attacks because of this. And it doesn't happen only with bursts, it happens with any attack. It is especially bad with dashes, because not only will you miss your target, but you will also be placed in a completely different spot than the one you wanted. In Abyss, where positioning tends to be pretty important, this usually warrants a reset. And the worst part is that it's not only annoying for combat, but it can be annoying for exploration too. I can't count the amount of times that I'm trying to run through a pack of enemies with Gyelan-Z, only for her to dash into an enemy that's literally behind her instead of running forward. This issue has been in the game since day one, and I don't get how we're still going 5 years later without any changes about it. It's insane. Now, this next one pisses me off a little more than most people, because it's the reason my friends quit the game. The problem here is that playing co-op sucks. The game clearly isn't made with co-op in mind. When we started the game, playing in co-op was actually useful, because we didn't have fully built characters yet, and we kinda sucked at the game. But as time passed, we realized that doing domains or bosses in co-op was actually slower than doing them in single player. So we stopped playing together, and my friends eventually quit the game. I'm not even going to say that we need endgame modes with co-op, or that there should be more content to do with friends, even though I agree with both of those. No, the problem here is that co-op combat is just bad. Being limited to only one character in a game that requires team rotations to be fun is just bad design. Literally, the only thing they need to do is to fix the combat in co-op is let every player have a full team and increase the enemy's health accordingly. Now, to fix the problem that there's no incentive to play co-op and the fact that it's slower to do domains and bosses in co-op would take a lot more thinking. I'm sure that they could come up with something for the first one, though I'm not sure there's a possible fix for the second one, unfortunately. I am sure, however, that they can do better than what they're currently doing. Right, this next section is about how the game looks and how it feels. Let's start with the first issue, animations. You know, I actually really thought this issue was fixed. About 1 year ago they said that they would add more custom animations and make dialogues more dynamic, and they kinda did. I think the place where the change was most visible was during the last Lantern Ride. I remember being surprised at the dialogue where Xiangling and Hu Tao were talking and actually moving while talking. Mizuki's story quest was also pretty good in this regard. But after playing the latest Archon quest, it's clear that there's still a lot of work to be done. I cannot believe that for the fight between Dainsleif and that Abyss guy that they chose to move the camera away and done a dumb camera shake to the scene. I was shocked when I saw that. Let's not forget that Genshin is the most successful gacha in the world right now, bringing in billions in earnings every year. If they can bother to animate a fight with one of the most important characters in the story, then what are we doing here? You have to understand, I'm not asking to have every dialogue in the game play 50 custom animations just for one scene. I'm used to playing old JRPGs, I'm used to static dialogues. But even the worst offenders there will actually try to do something. Have a few different facial expressions, play a few idle animations, or move a few characters around. Here, it seems like characters can only either talk or move, never both at the same time. And don't even think about having characters talking while fighting. With most JRPGs, I think you can divide interactions into 3 types: dialogues, in-game cutscenes, and CGI cutscenes, or anime cutscenes. In Genshin, it feels like they almost never use in-game cutscenes, and I think they should start using those a whole lot more if they want the game to look and feel better. They did say they will try to change this in Not Cry, but considering they already said this before and failed, I'm not sure what to think. My second complaint here is that world quests are not voiced. Listen, I can understand not wanting to voice every single quest in the game, that's fine, but the important world quest of every region should be voiced. Jet's questline, the Narcissan Croy, the Arnara questline, and all the others should all be fully voiced. They're all great stories that unfortunately lose a lot of emotion from not being voice acted, and not having voices also makes people in the community not want to play them. And it's a shame, because Jet's questline is like one of the best stories in Genshin. Considering how big the game is and how much money they're making, I don't think I'm asking for too much here. I would be fine with them releasing updates less often if we got this in return. It's just one quest every set of versions, I don't think I'm asking for too much here. I already mentioned this on the character section, but characters aren't cool enough. I understand that the average power level of a Genshin character isn't huge, but I think it's plenty enough to have them do cooler stuff than what they're actually doing. I think something like Arlecchino or Mavuika's BFX should be the standard for all 5-star characters, and then the more important ones should get even crazier ones. We're talking about the Archons and the Fatui Harbingers here, they need to look and feel powerful. But it's not just a matter of BFX, it's also a matter of animations. Almost every single character in the game feels incredibly static, and I think that's actually a bigger problem that's hurting the gameplay and presentation, just so much more. I probably should have mentioned this in the gameplay section, but whatever. Let's look at a couple of characters so you'll understand my point, the first one being Chlorinde. She's supposed to be a duelist that dances around her enemies at lightning speeds, and if you look at her gameplay without having played her, you'd think that's accurate. But once you actually use her in combat, you notice it doesn't feel quite right. You attack 3 times, then you dash, but the dash is only in a straight line, there's no horizontal movement at all. And worst of all, there's no momentum, no carrying of speed, no flow. Once the dash distance is over, she fully stops, and the feeling of dancing around your enemies is fully lost. The second character I want to talk about is Kokomi, and this one is way easier to explain. Her design is based on a mermaid, so you would expect her to be able to fly around like she's swimming while she's on her burst, and to attack while doing so. But not only can you not attack while moving, but her movement animations don't change at all while on her burst. Now, I'm not trying to say that every character should float around, that's actually one of the reasons I hate Kingdom Hearts 3. But there's plenty of characters who would feel a lot better with a tiny bit more freedom of movement. Say, if bow characters can move around while aiming, then they should also be able to move around while shooting basic attacks. And the same with long-range catalyst users. And characters that have dashes on their skills should carry a tiny bit of momentum when using them. They shouldn't just fully stop after a skill is over. I think adding tiny changes like this would help a lot with how combat feels and looks like. And it would also help in making every character's gameplay feel different. I don't think they will change how the characters move and their momentum anytime soon, but I'm hopeful about having more animations be more mobile. Lanyan's E is a recent example of how they can do that. It's nothing crazy, but it has a little bit of verticality and a bit of camera work, and just those two things make it feel a lot better and a lot different than the rest of the skills in the game, in my opinion. Hopefully, Hoyoverse will notice that people like Lanyan's animations and can build on that for future characters in Not Cry. Here I'll talk not only about the actual gacha system, but all the other things that most gacha games have, like events, endgame content, etc. Let's start with the actual pooling though, and the biggest offender here is the 50-50 PT. The whole point of a PT system is to guarantee that you get the unit that you want. I would much rather they increase the PT count, but actually made it a 100% chance to get the banner unit. I'm a free-to-play player, and the way you don't fall behind as a free-to-play player is by always PTing good units. If I actually want to PT a unit here, I need at least 24,000 gems. Sometimes even more if I'm unlucky and don't hit soft PT early. Which, by the way, that's another stupid thing that adds another layer of randomness, soft PT. In every other gacha game, if you pull until PT, you either hit the unit early, or you get it after X amount of pulls. Guaranteed. In Genshin, not only can you miss a 50-50 and have to pull twice as many times as another player, but you can also get unlucky with a soft PT and have to pull up to 15 times more to get the unit. The amount of variance between a lucky player and an unlucky one is insane, and it's extremely annoying because even if you do save for a unit that you want, the game can decide to screw you anyways and force you to do 180 pulls to get the unit, while another player can get away with just 75. This pity system is really bad, and even more so when you consider that to get enough gems to actually guarantee a unit, you have to complete all the content of like 1.5 patches. That's 2 months of clearing all the content just to get one unit. It sucks. But that's not everything that's bad about the gacha, oh no. Because on top of that, you also have weapons you can pull for. Not only do they look 1,000 times better than the other options, most of the time, but most importantly, they are way stronger, making characters between 10 to even 40% stronger compared to the other options. But the weapon banner is somehow even worse than the regular banner. Here, not only do you need to hit a 75% chance of getting a feature, but you also need to hit a 50% chance to get the one that you actually want. Yes, the soft PT is lower than the regular banner, but I don't think that makes it any better. I haven't played that many gacha games in my life, I think maybe 6 or 7, but I've never seen one like Genshin that makes you pull for a character and their weapon. It just seems incredibly stupid and awful for the player. Alright, I swear this is the last complaint about the gacha, but this one is especially bad for free-to-play players. In many other gacha games I've played, the standard banner will be updated frequently to add new units, so standard pulls remain somewhat useful. The standard banner in Genshin does get updated too, but for some reason they only update it with 4-star units. And when they do add a new 5-star unit to the standard banner, like once every blue moon, they don't add all units. Oh no, they make a new character, give it the worst kit in the entire game, and put it into the standard banner after one promotional banner. Teiya, Tainari, and Mizuki should have all been actual 5-star characters with a power level befitting of a new 5-star. Instead, they were completely gutted so that they could be added to the standard banner. Why do that? Why can't we just do like every other gacha game and periodically add all their units to the standard banner? And while we're talking about the standard banner, many other gacha games also have a wishlist system for it, where you can pick which units you want to have a rate up. No such a thing here, of course, because Hoyoverse doesn't want me to get my day up to C6 so she can start dealing as much damage as a C0 Hutao. I just don't understand why, just why. Alright, I'm done talking about the gacha. Let's move on to endgame content. Now, most of my complaints here I've actually already voiced in the gameplay section, so I won't repeat those. My issue here is how much the endgame caters to the new characters. Listen, I understand that this is normal, and I agree. The new shiny unit needs to be good in the current endgame content, or else it won't sell as well. That's fine. What's not fine is how hard they double down on this. Not only do they have extremely specific buffs to only buff the banner units that are insanely strong, but they will also go as far as filling an entire chamber in the Abyss with enemies that are tailor-made to be defeated by the unit. And yes, these enemies are specifically made for the unit. You cannot tell me that they made that stupid cryo requirement boss without Skirgan's coffee in mind. The difference between doing Abyss with a new banner unit and without it is like night and day, and it feels really, really bad for free-to-play players who just can't pull for every single unit. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. It seems that Hoyoverse are allergic to releasing skins in Genshin. And this is the one thing I actually cannot understand, like there's literally no reason for them to do this. Can you imagine the amount of money they would make if they released more skins? And I'm saying this as a free-to-play player that's never going to buy a skin. I actually really like when they release free costumes, even if they don't change the VFX of the character. It's still nice to have a fresh look. Why not increase the amount of skins made? They obviously have the resources for it with how much money they're making. Every single other gacha game releases costumes with every single update pretty much, sometimes maybe even multiple ones at the same time if it's a big event. Here, they've only released 21 skins in 5 years. And that's me being generous and counting the censored outfits for the monster characters as skins. I'm not asking them to release more 5-star skins. I'm not asking for more free skins. I'm not even asking for more seasonal outfits. I'm just asking for more skins in general. An average of 4 costumes a year is just really sad. Another big part of gacha games are the events. And I'm going to be honest, I actually don't like a lot of the events here. The big ones that actually have quests and some sort of story to tell are just fine. Shadows amid snowstorms, the summer events, unreconciled stars, these are cool. My problem is with the events are just dumb minigames that don't bring anything to the table. They're supposed to be just for fun, but most of the time they're not even fun. They're just bad copies of popular games at the time. They used to be at least short, but lately it seems they keep making them longer and longer, and it's just getting more annoying. The auto chess event, the alchemy event, and these are just the big ones. Every single version will have 1 or 2 events where you just run up to an NPC, talk to it, and get into a minigame or a series of combats. I've heard many people complain about Star Rail's lack of events, but honestly, I actually like that, because with only 2 events every patch, they can focus on the quality of those. Here, for some reason, they feel obligated to put out at least 3 or 4 events every patch. And what ends up happening is that the smaller events feel like just total filler. In my opinion, they should just remove these filler events and focus their efforts on the big ones. I don't need to always have something to do, it's fine if the latter half of a version is empty. I think a good idea would be to throw in those Primogen bonuses they threw in that land for exploring instead of making these events. Exploration is the main aspect of the game in my opinion, and I'd much rather do that than just dumb minigames. There's one big part of all gacha games that is noticeably missing from Genshin. I'm obviously talking about collaborations. And no, the one with Horizon doesn't count. That was part of a contract with Sony, they didn't do that because they wanted to. Collabs are pretty much always hype in any gacha game, and they bring in a lot of money for the developers. Hoyoverse has already done collabs in Star Rail and Honkai 3rd, and I'm sure they'll have them too on Zenless, so I don't get why they just refuse to have them in Genshin. I mean, if they wanted to have a game free of collabs, then it's already too late for that, because so they might as well go in and have more of them in my opinion. Genshin is the biggest gacha game in the world right now, and I'm sure there's plenty of IPs that want to be a part of the game, and plenty of fans of those IPs that would love to see them in the game. I really don't understand what motive Hoyoverse could have for not wanting collabs. And don't try to argue that they wouldn't fit in Genshin or that they would break immersion, there's always a way to make it work. They don't even need to add characters if they think it would be too off-putting. They can just add skins to existing characters and call it a day. I get that because it's such a big game that it doesn't need collabs to promote itself, but I've never seen collaborations as promotions. Maybe I'm just naive, but when I see something like Nikke collab with Nier Automata, or when I see Honkai 3rd collab with Evangelion, it seems more like mutual respect than an attempt to promote their IPs. Surely there's at least one IP that the Genshin devs like. In one of the Notcrite videos they mentioned other IPs as inspiration for Notcrite, so clearly they like other stuff. Anyway, I'm not going to hold my breath here. If we haven't had any after 5 years, then the chances are pretty much negative. But I don't know, maybe they're waiting for part 2 of the story? After the story goes beyond Teyvat? That would make some sort of sense. So we can only hope for that. In this final section, I'm going to talk about all the minor things that I don't like and that don't really fit into any other category. There's quite a lot of these, even though most of them are just minor quality of life changes. I feel like they should have been done like a long time ago. Also, a lot of these are already implemented in other Hoyoverse games, so I don't get why they are not implemented here. As far as I'm aware, their games are all on the same engine. I understand that they have studios all around the world, but come on, surely there's some communication between the teams. It's actually really sad how Star Rail is 3 years younger than Genshin, but you can store more artifacts in Star Rail. Anyway, let's start with this. 1. Why are daily quest points removed at the start of every major version? This doesn't make any sense. The only thing this accomplishes is restricting me from exploring the map until the points are reset. Right now, it's version 5.7 and I'm sitting here wanting to explore the regions that I haven't, but I can't, because I already have 400 of these points and they're going to expire soon. This is just dumb. 2. Like I mentioned before, please increase the artifact limit. It makes no sense to have so low a number after 5 years. I keep having to delete artifacts to make space, it's just obnoxious. 3. Stop forcing me to play with other people in events. The game is pretty much 99% playable in single player. Why are you forcing me to play with other people for some of these dumb minigame events? Just remove them completely or add bots so I can play alone. 4. Having the Leyland message appear every time you reset a domain is one extra click that I have to go through for no reason. That message should either only appear the first time or give us a setting to disable them. 5. The fact that the coin shop characters and weapons haven't been updated since 1.0 is actually incredible. It should be updated at the start of every major version, or maybe even more often than that. Right now, this is beyond outdated. Like, you could straight up put some 5-star characters in there and it still wouldn't feel like too much. And I don't want to be the comparison guy, but again, Star Rail lets you purchase 5 stars with the same coins. Why can't we have that here? 6. We should have the option to replay past quests if we want to. And no, having the text of the quest in the archives is not a valid substitution. Here's one reason why. I would have loved to throw in footage for certain quests in this video, as I was talking about them, but I couldn't, because Hoyoverse somehow thought having the text of the quests is equivalent to being able to replay it. It's not. Just let us replay the quests, make it an optional download if you want, so mobile players don't complain, but we should be able to do it. 7. In that same vein, important events should be permanent. If the event is relevant to character progression or to the storyline, it should be permanent. The summer events should all be permanent, Shadows Amid Snowstorms should be permanent, all the Lantern Rides should be permanent, etc. Again, make them an optional download if you want. But not having these events available to new players just really hurts their experience with the game. 8. I don't quite understand why in Fontaine we managed to make swimming go from infuriating to totally fine, and then for Natlan decided to go back to infuriating? I mean, I can understand not wanting to make timing available everywhere, because that would mean changing a lot of the map, but surely we can keep the stamina bar from Fontaine, and we can implement it everywhere? It would make movement across water a lot less annoying. 9. Why is there still a day restriction on domains? It serves zero purpose. There's literally no reason why we shouldn't be able to farm any material any day of the week. Just remove this from the game. 10. Why do we still need to walk all the way to a crafting table to craft condensed resin? I can understand it for the other materials, but having to walk to the table every single day for the resin ends up getting annoying. Yes, this is not a big deal, but again, you can craft what's quote-unquote condensed resin from anywhere in Star Rail. Why can't we do that here? 11. Once I fully explore a region and hit 100% exploration, all remaining chests and challenges should be to just mark on the map. That's what I did on one of the summer events, and it was lovely, it was great. I shouldn't need to walk around a mostly empty area trying to search for a needle in a haystack. Just put that in all areas. If you've already implemented it once, why not again? 12. Okay, this complaint is a bit stupid, but why does the teapot force you into multiplayer mode? It makes no sense, and it makes it a bit annoying because the game doesn't actually pause in multiplayer mode, so voice lines just keep playing if you're AFK. 13. Why do I need to manually delete the useless 3 and 4 star artifacts? They should just get converted to XP immediately after completing a domain, just like in Star Rail. 14. Take a shot every time I compare this to Star Rail, but oh well. Star Rail has a menu called a databank where you can check information on important concepts, characters, factions, etc. Why don't we have that here? Just add it. 15. Genshin came out 3 years before Star Rail, but somehow Star Rail has faster resin regeneration, a bigger resin cap, and also the system for when you overflow on resin. That's 3 more things that we don't have that here. Please add those here. 16. The Abyss timer should stop during burst animations. I should not get punished for using as a song limiter. Also, having the Abyss timer work during bursts limits their creativity, because they can't make bursts longer and cooler without punishing the character for no reason. 17. How is it possible that we haven't gotten a single stamina upgrade in 5 years? I don't understand what reason Hoyoverse could have for not letting us run longer to make exploration less annoying. And don't try to tell me it's for balance reasons, because no, giving us 50 more stamina isn't going to make Hutao go up 2 tiers in the tier list. Just increase the maximum stamina, please. 18. This might just be a me thing, but I feel like the volume balance, specifically for music, is kinda all over the place. I'll be exploring and the music will be fine, but then get into a dialogue and I can't hear it at all. Maybe I'm just dumb and haven't found the right settings, but it feels weird. 19. They actually just announced that they're going to fix this next one for version 5.8, but I'm still going to complain, because there's no way it took them 5 years to add the option to change volume settings inside a dialogue. And the whole issue isn't even fixed, because fun fact, you can't open the settings while inside a domain, meaning you can't change the settings from there. Please change that. 20. Night Soul transmission is actually a decent mechanic and pretty useful when I actually want to use it. When I don't, it's the most annoying thing in the world. Try to fight using Baresa and Jansen in Natlan, and you'll quickly see that it becomes a nightmare not to fly off in the middle of combat. Just let us disable it, or just change the button used to activate it. Maybe just shift and the number of the character you want to change to. 21. I don't get why weekly bosses are limited to 1 per week if we have 3 tries. Just let me use my 3 tries on the same boss. With the current system, it's really bad when a new character releases, because if they use materials from a new weekly boss, then you're stuck with low-level Terrans for a couple of weeks. Just change it. 22. For some reason, the Adventurer Handbook will let you know the location of every single plant / material in the area. But for enemies, it only shows a couple of them, and then just stops working. I don't want to have to open an interactive map. I don't have a second screen. Why can't we just make the handbook show the location of all the enemies? 23. A lot of gacha games will give you a faster way to do content that you've out-leveled or that you've managed to clear complete following a set of requirements. If I can clear a domain in less than 20 seconds in autopilot mode, then I think they should just give me a button to skip that. Yes, you can argue that it's bad because it turns the game into a UI simulator. I argue that it would give me more time to play the actual video game. 24. Why do different body types have different bunny hop animations? I always move with bunny hops because it's just the fastest way to move, excluding skills. Doing that with a male or a tall female is totally fine, but for some reason they decided to give short females and children an awful animation that's just so much slower than the other ones. This is less of an issue now with movement skills, but come on, characters shouldn't be worse because of their gender or their height, that's just not fair. 25. Speaking of bad movement, please let me disable alternate sprints. I am a very unlucky man, or lucky depending on how you see it, and I have a Mona C6. I like her a lot, both in story and in gameplay, and yet I never play her because trying to play a character with an alternate sprint is like bashing your head against the wall. Yes, I know they used to be way worse, and no, I don't care. They might be better for exploration now, but in combat they're still awful to play with. 26. Literally almost every video game in existence lets me set the FPS higher than 60. I know that they have an exclusive contract with Apple, and I don't care. They shouldn't have entered into that contract in the first place. Playing at 120 or 144 FPS feels so much smoother, and the game just doesn't let me. 27. Few things piss me off more than when they give a new character just crazy normal attack animations, only for them to hit less than a wet noodle. You could straight up give every character in the game that isn't a normal attack DPS a 200% damage increase on their normal attacks, and nothing would change about how they play it. But at least I would be able to use those attacks in an off-meta team if I really like the character. 28. Why do I need to wait 3 seconds without moving before I can change my team? If they don't want us to change teams while in combat, they can just put a restriction instead of a dumb timer every time we want to change a team. 29. Star Rail has a feature where you only need to click on one reward of an event to get all rewards on the same page. That feature was implemented over a year ago over there, and somehow it's still not here. So for every event, I'm forced to click 24 times to get all the rewards. If it's possible there, then it's possible here. There's no excuses. 29. The last 5-star physical character to release was Eula, and the last 4-star was Ferminette, who just has the same kit as Eula pretty much. Can we please start adding more? 1. Because physical damage goblets right now are worthless. 2. Because the physical characters they release tend to have more fun rotations than the other characters. And 3. Because it's nice to have some variety, and it's great to see characters that don't rely on the power of their vision to fight. And finally, 30. It's really sad to see that the biggest gacha game in the world doesn't have special animations when pulling a character. I'm not asking for a full movie for every character, but come on, we had pulling animations in beta. Why did we cancel those? Just put them in the game, we can do way better than showing a PNG. Alright, that should be everything. At least everything that I can remember right now. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that I've missed, but this game is so huge that it's hard to remember every single detail about it. I also didn't want to go in too deep, partly to keep the video short, but mostly because I don't think it's helpful for anyone to criticize every small detail. I could rant an extra 2 hours about things like why Sumeru's plan was dumb, or the quest inside Fontaine's prison was the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but I just don't see the point. I've already mentioned plenty of stuff to change and fix as it is. Like I said in the intro, I don't think any of the problems I've mentioned here are new. I've heard them all plenty of times on social media. But the issue here is that every day I keep hearing less and less about them. People keep moving on and just complain about the latest thing while forgetting that there's 5 years worth of issues that are more important than the new ones. Just because it's been a long time doesn't mean the issues have disappeared. That's another reason I made this video, to remind everyone what the core issues in Genshin are, since it seems many people have forgotten about them and just don't bother complaining anymore. But Hoyoverse will never bother fixing this unless we keep asking them to do it. On Deia's release date, I changed my description in-game to #fixdeia, and I've kept it ever since. Every single version that comes out, I voice all my complaints on the survey, and I will keep doing it until they are all fixed. I encourage you all to do the same, and not only mention the latest issues, but also the ones that have been here since day one. I know you know they know about them, but you need to keep reminding them, or else they will never be fixed. Okay, I'm done now, I promise. Like I said before, the next video will be the counterpart to this one, where I'll talk about everything I do like about Genshin. I'd recommend watching both to have the full context on what you think about the game as a whole. And with that, I take my leave. See you next time.